Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Red Tinted Glasses podcast. Delighted to be joined once again by Andy Skinner as we look back as the Dons were defeated on their first match day of the UEFA Conference League, but rooms to maybe feel a bit confident ahead of what feels like a must-win game this weekend as Dundee are the visitors in the Scottish Premiership. Skinner ultimately defeat, but walking away from Pittodrie last night, a little bit of pride based on that performance.
Very much so, yeah. Clearly, it was a pretty fruitless night for the Scottish clubs in Europe, but I think by far and away, Aberdeen come away from their night's work with the most pride and the biggest right to feel like they've given it a good shot.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose I'm a little bit conflicted in how I feel, even 24 hours down the line, because part of me actually feels like it was a bit of a missed opportunity given just how tight the game was. But then when you relate that to what we were expecting going into the match, our form going into it, the quality undoubtedly that Shakhtar Donetsk pose
Mm-hmm.
to keep the game so live really throughout, just about the entirety of the 90 minutes, probably surpasses expectations. However, there is that nagging little feeling that would have been great to just get a point on the board to really kickstart this Europa League, Conference League, sorry, group campaign, and really just send a statement out.
And it's
That's
funny
the sore
because,
bit for me today.
yeah, I was with the game with a couple of pals, obviously with yourself and Keith pre-match, and obviously in our pre-match discussion, was how can we avoid a heavy defeat, and the guys that I was at the game with, Niall was saying, towards full time, this feels like a missed opportunity, and I'm kind of interested that you saying that as well, because for me, I'm conflicted as well and I totally understand why people will have that feeling that it was a missed opportunity, but it took us really to go 3-1 down to kind of come out our shells. So I see why it feels like a missed opportunity, because we got it back to 3-2, had a couple of chances on the back of that as well. But I feel had we maybe started the game in the style that we ended it,
Mm-hmm.
Shakhtar could have probably picked us off at will.
Yeah.
So you can definitely see it both ways. I think, as I said, overall, and Jimmy Tilleen mentions it in his post-match comments about that performance towards the end has now got to be the standard going forward. And I think, as I said, leaving Pittodrie, yes, I can understand the disappointment, but there was a bit of pride there, but also, right, to the best of our ability, we now need to go and match that on Sunday when Dundee come to town. But
Mm-hmm.
again, European nights at Pittodrie, the atmosphere was certainly there pre-match, and
Yeah.
while the start was lively, and I thought we handled the occasion extremely well, because again, like Andrew said on the preview pod, um, Shakhtar did kind of come out trying to play their own football, but we get the penalty through VAR, and I mean, you sit in the main stand. Could you see quite clearly there was a handball involved there?
No, I'm not
No.
going to lie. No, but what I will say is that you can tell. I mean, the people that had the best view of it really are the guys sitting in the lower Dick Donald stand, and
Mm.
you know how you can just tell when a penalty appeal is, it's meaningful and it has a little bit of weight behind it compared to one that you maybe just shout for in hope more than anything. You could
Mhm.
tell with the noise reaction off the back of the handball that something had clearly happened that was worth checking.
Yeah.
And to be fair, the referee and the VAR team were really quick and efficient in producing the outcome that led to the penalty kick. So I was delighted with that start really.
And great penalty as well from Jesper Karlsson under that
Yeah.
pressure. Obviously all the talk with how we'd been so long without a goal. Yes, the keeper goes the right way, but keeps it low and controlled into the side netting. And yeah, a great platform for us to build on, or should have
Oh,
been
very much
maybe.
so. Yeah, and a moment that I'll mention as well that maybe gets quite easily forgotten about in the aftermath of the game is Leighton Clarkson getting the ball handed to him basically by the goalkeeper who slipped, and he's probably half second away from having the opportunity to really go and craft a shot at goal, maybe quite similar to Lazatic on Saturday, in a slightly different way, I suppose.
Yeah, I
But if
actually
he'd
forgot
just shown
about
a
that
little bit,
chance.
if he'd shown a little bit more composure there, 2-0 up after 10 minutes, we could have been well on our way to a Copenhagen-esque night for Pittodrie, I reckon. Well, who knows? But because we certainly saw, even prior to our goal, I thought we saw flashes from Shakhtar that showed that they were a really quick and slick side. They were just rapid with their intensity. But I thought, the game obviously transpired in different stages. And from the first half point of view, our performance was really disciplined and organised after going 1-0 up. We obviously didn't threaten really beyond that Clarkson chance. We were kind of in our own half for the most part, getting increasingly deep and becoming a bit vulnerable, particularly to. Sorry, it's my wee man crawling to the kitchen just now.
Wee man's wanting an appearance on the podcast.
Absolutely, he's desperate for it.
After a European night. But no, I think you're
No,
right in that sense, because, as you said, until you recalled that Leighton Clarkson opportunity there, I'd kind of erased it from my memory. But I think discipline is an absolute correct word to use for that first half performance. We didn't kind of break the lines of our defense, allowing Shakhtar any free space to play into, and you kind of saw their wing backs getting frustrated at their own players
yes,
coming out looking for the ball as well. I agree that they were totally slick. The way that they can control the ball and move the ball was an absolute joy to watch, at times, and their third goal really summed up just how good a footballing side that they are as well. But I also think in that first half, our discipline was leading to frustration on their part. You could see that the frustration was beginning to grow from the chances that they were creating weren't kind of clear cut as such.
no.
And I don't know, it was again, tinge of disappointment to be going in at halftime 1-1, but again, the other half of me was like, the goal did feel like it was coming. I don't know if that's something that you share.
Yeah, well, as much as they didn't really threaten from open play, I was getting a little bit worried from set pieces. I mean, remember the sitter that they missed just not long before the goal?
Yeah.
And there were a couple of corners that Mitov sort of punched away. I've got no issue with goalkeepers punching it if it is the best option for them, but I got the sense that he just wasn't quite settled. And I suppose it was one of them that actually led to the goal as well, because it went out to the opposite flank and it was kind of delivered. I thought they were knocking on the door, but our performance was almost akin to the cup final in a lot of ways, in the way that we just had that discipline and organisation to stifle what they were doing. Whether that was down to the new look formation that we've seen in place for the last two games, and that kind of ties in with the game plan. Getting the 1-goal lead after 6 minutes perhaps wasn't part of that game plan, but I thought the reaction to going a goal up in the circumstances and knowing the quality that our opponents possessed was impressive. And I felt quite comfortable, but just given the quality that we were up against, there was that nagging feeling that it's not going to take much here. It could just be a very quick switch off, or just a piece of class that breaks through us, and that probably is the frustration for not just the first goal but all three goals. Actually, was that it's not really The third goal, we'll get onto this when we come to the second half. The
Well,
third goal is
I
probably
was going
the
to say,
best.
do you think the first goal, oh, the equaliser, is a touch of class, or I'm loath to blame Mitov because I do think it's a quality finish personally. I think my initial thought was he could have done better because just where I was standing and the way he kind
Yeah,
of goes for the ball, but you're also like, fucking hell, how's he found
yeah,
the inside of the post and the way that was going? I wonder as well if a bit of Mitov thinks it's going flashing wide and he doesn't want to ricochet it into any of the, because it was quite a
yeah.
crowded box in that instance as well. But another point that you made as well is, and again, all three goals actually last night were balls to the back post. Shakhtar
Switches of play.
clearly,
Yeah,
yeah, they clearly worked on a weakness. I mean, I'm not singling out Topi Keskinen, but that side, two of the goals come from. I mean, Topi's not directly to blame for them. You could maybe argue the second goal a little bit, but um, it was clear that they'd worked out that our wing backs area was something that they could exploit, and they did that to great effect. But yeah, where do you stand on that first goal? Brilliance or a bit disappointed?
very good finish given just the manner of it and the tightness of the angle. But I would look upon just the defensive unit as being a little bit rushed in terms of bunching up to sort of go and chase the ball where it was. I think there was a little bit of a gap left at the far post, and Keskinen, I suppose, was a surprise inclusion in terms of the position that he was
Yeah.
playing as a left wing back on the night. And I thought that was effective for a lot of purposes. But when it came to those cross balls that were coming in, I suppose that's maybe where his lack of defensive instincts were laid bare.
Yeah, second goal in particular.
Second goal in particular, yeah. I can't really remember. I mean, I have watched the highlights back. I can't remember exactly who was supposed to be marking. The player that scored the equaliser. But just the unit as a whole, I think, slightly switched off maybe in terms of covering that whole penalty box. And so Mitov,
In terms of the defensive unit,
yeah,
in terms of the defensive unit, you mentioned they're being bunched up. Obviously, we change it up, as you say, Keskinen coming in at left wing back, Jack Milne coming in into a role that he shone in that cup final, and Nicky Devlin captaining the side until Graham Shinney enters the fray later on. On those two, look, I've been a heavy critic of Jack Milne on here this season around how he's kind of appeared nervous. Certainly made me eat my words last night. I thought he was outstanding.
yeah, outstanding.
Throughout that game, dealt with everything coming his way, especially on the back of how, again, nervous he looked in that European game against FCSB, and the mistake he made at Pataudry really rose to the occasion. But Nicky Devlin, when there's been a lot of talk around that right wing back position and should Alexander Jensen be starting, I think Nicky Devlin was absolutely outstanding and really nailed his colours to the mast of wanting to hold down that position as his own. Albeit, I doubt we see him start there on Sunday, given he literally was spent when he came off. He'd given it all
absolutely.
to the cause last night.
He did. I remember. I mean, got a good view of it from the main stand actually. Just when. Because he'd been penalised for a foul. Remember the one where Carlson had played him through in a really promising crossing position, and he took a heavy touch and ran it out, but in doing so fouled the Shakhtar player. It was on the way back from that he was just burst. It was clear, and he was almost signalling to the bench, "Please, just get me off here." But Shakhtar broke really quickly, and to be fair to him, he absolutely pelted it back to cover. He kind of just forgot about all the aches and pains that were clearly, pinning him down at that stage in the game. Understandable, I suppose, that he's not really played that much football. I know he was back in the side on Saturday, but very much in and out of the side. And you're right in terms of the sort of performance you're going to get from Nicky. Very much a heart on sleeve sort of performance that that we needed last night in a lot of ways, especially when
Yeah.
you take Shinnie out of the team. Because I have questioned the lack of those types that have not so
It's a
much.
leadership player, isn't it?
Yeah, and touched on the fact a couple of weeks ago that Jimmy can make substitutions en masse and completely change the outlook of the team, almost, the makeup of the team. And in spells of games, we can sometimes look a little bit bereft of that sort of leadership. But given that Nicky was captaining the side in a side that didn't have Shinnie in it, obviously Stuart Armstrong was in from the start as well. But I thought he rose to the occasion and really produced the sort of performance that we were needing from him.
Oh, I
And
mean,
Jack Milne as well. I suppose just to touch on that, I mean, we spoke, off the back of that FCSB game about how it had been a little bit of an unsettled start to the season for him. And I think a point that one of us made was along the lines of, taking him out of the team at this point back then might not actually be the worst thing for him. It won't be done in a way where it's like punishment for any mistake. It's actually just giving a young player the chance to just come away from the pressure of that and maybe quietly work on some of those mistakes and try to eradicate them. Well, I thought we saw that case in point. He looked as if he was just a lot more sure of what he was doing, his distances, his reading of the game, and he got his tackling spot on as well. There were some really good last-ditch blocks from him that just gave off all the indications of a guy that was really desperate to come in and show that he's worthy of holding down that position at the heart of our backline.
Yeah, and I thought, as I said, a very assured performance, and mentioned even to Alfie Dorrington as well, who's, again, looked maybe a little bit ropey in some of the league games as well. Given obviously the news that Christers Tobers is going to be out for an extended period of time, again, defensively, we've not, I don't think, looked too bad, apart from pieces, which of course slash balls into the box, which again Shakhtar exploited. The defense by and large has been solid for me this season. It's at the top end of the pitch where we've had the problems. In the first half the goal doesn't come from open play. Marko Lazetic may be also a surprise in that starting lineup and leading the line. Personally, I don't know what to make of his performance last night. Maybe the effort that leads to the second goal clouds a lot of judgment. I thought he was a good physical presence that ruffled up the Shakhtar defense, but I don't know, was I blown away by his performance? Probably not. But did I think he was terrible? Equally not. I don't know. Any thoughts from yourself on Lazetic's performance?
Yeah, personally, I thought his performance was a real highlight on the night, actually. Just in terms of what we needed up against, clearly an experienced defensive line. I thought he worked hard and he showed good instincts when the ball came to him in tight areas as well. Obviously the goal was the perfect example of that. Doesn't have much time there at all, and he unleashes a fantastic effort, which is unlucky not to find the net. Similar kind of one in the first half. I can't remember if it came from a throw-in as well, but and the only other chance I remember was one kind of a little bit earlier on in the second half, which wasn't a good effort at all. It was off target, but I just thought in terms of what we were looking for on the night and what realistically our centre forward was going to be up against. He was probably I'm early to judge Lazetic and draw conclusions as to what sort of player he is, but it strikes me that he will feed off scraps a little bit more effectively than Nisbet. Nisbet will come alive a little bit more in the box and be a more reliable bet for finishing off a chance if it falls to him. But last night was a game where, I suppose a lot of his play was happening, or a lot of his involvement was happening well out with the box. And I just thought he was a lively presence in connecting some of our play in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose maybe when we were out of possession, he, as the furthest forward player in our team, there might have been situations where he could have stayed a little bit higher up, maybe held his
Mm-hmm.
position on the halfway line a little bit,
Yeah.
because in him dropping so deep, that kind of just encourages the whole unit to do
Mm-hmm.
likewise, and there was maybe an element of that sort of leaving us in a vulnerable position towards the end of the first half, I
Yeah, and I
thought.
think that
But
was the frustration in the first half for me, was that we didn't, when we were soaking up the amount of pressure that we didn't necessarily have that out ball
yeah,
in Lazetic. Sometimes we were a little bit guilty of trying to overplay our way out of the pressure that we'd got ourselves into. But I have to say, I was really impressed by that midfield duo of Stuart Armstrong and Leighton Clarkson.
yeah,
I mean, the quality that Stuart Armstrong possesses, to, again, probably the closest we have, those two players, to some of the quality Shakhtar have in terms of close ball control and being
yeah,
able to thread a pass through a tight window. And yeah, I thought our midfield in general coped really well last night. I suppose the talking point in terms of the midfield will be in the second half, when Sivert Nielsen comes on, and quite audible groans, if we want to call it that, from around the ground. I think it's safe to say, not just one element. Thoughts on that?
Well, the substitution, well, whatever combination of substitutions, because obviously three of them came on at the one time, and at
Mm-hmm.
one point Nielsen was ready to come on, and then the bib went back on.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if the subs were being prepared before the second goal, but they were certainly being prepared before the third.
Mm-hmm.
And for what it's worth, I actually think we were. I know he's been much maligned in terms of um, what he's brought to the side this season in particular, maybe a bit of last season as well, Nielsen. But I thought he did really well when he came on, and
Yeah.
I actually feel as if we really could have done with him being there, him and Shinnie, in the move
See,
that led to the third goal.
what
Because
from do you think, in terms of having them on from the start, or
no,
in terms of
no.
yeah?
I think had Jimmy had his way and managed to get that substitution through before the third goal, maybe even before the second goal, I think some of the space that opened up, particularly for the third goal. Again, another cross field ball that was headed down from Devlin's area,
Yeah.
exposed a big gap in, between the right back area and the midfield. Because
Mm.
Clarkson, you're right to point out how well he played, but similar to Devlin later in the match, he was absolutely burst as well.
Yeah.
And so he struggled to track back to meet the run of the left back, who ended up finishing superbly well, but there was no one near him.
And yeah, the quality of that finish and the speed that it comes off is
Yeah,
weaker fruit, let's remember, is absolutely unbelievable. I would love to know the ball speed as it hit the back of the net, because it must be
no,
touching three
absolutely,
figures.
three figures, yeah, absolutely. But I think Jimmy had a plan in mind, or he had identified the need to have a slightly tighter and deeper midfield presence on the field during that period of the game. Hence why Nielsen, as I say, was one of two, at least two, but it ended up being three subs that were being prepared in that phase. The
Mm-hmm.
third goal just sort of maybe puts us on the back foot, and fair play to Jimmy for seeing it through. He had to adapt quite quickly in terms of what he was planning on doing, and he ended up getting us into a position where we got back into the match. But
Yeah.
I just think a little bit more of a defensive presence in that midfield during that stage in the
Mm-hmm.
game could have really helped us thwart
Yeah,
some of
and I
that
think,
that danger that.
on Nielsen as well, I think I don't get where the booing him onto the pitch comes
No.
from, and I don't know if it because I agree. I thought he did well last night when he came on, even if I wasn't blown away by him coming on. In the sense when the game was 3-1, I thought, what's he going to add to the game? But I actually viewed it as a point of, well, you mentioned like Clarkson. I thought Stuart Armstrong had done well, but again, did Jimmy have almost one eye on Sunday? And it was like, right, we're not going to get 3 goals back to win the game. Let's freshen it up, obviously, to try and get ourselves back in the game, but with one eye on Sunday, because
Yeah.
for me, the biggest game this week is Sunday's game. And I wondered if there was a little bit of that. I just can't. I don't recall the last time I've seen that, certainly in a European game, and it was
No, you never want to see that at all.
no, and look, it's certainly not nice to see your own players getting booed onto the pitch. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, fair play to Sievert for rising above it and not putting a foot wrong when he came on. And I think also credit to the team as a whole for finding themselves 3-1 down, because the heads could have gone down. And I have to say, with still a good 25 minutes, close to half an hour to go, I don't know if you were also fearing that it could have quite easily turned into a bit of a hiding, which I don't think would have done us the world of good ahead of this weekend.
No, not at all. That was an obvious fear, because there was a lot of football still to be played at that stage. I think it was 58 minutes that they went 3-1 up.
Yeah.
And I suppose by bringing on that experience, Nielsen and Shinnie, obviously Dante Polvara came on as part of the same triple substitution.
Mm-hmm.
But by doing that, I guess you brought experience that could help in a situation. Had we found ourselves really under the cosh, then it might have been helpful to have experience like that to stop the bleeding, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
If that was the purpose. But as it transpired, we managed to reignite the tie.
Yeah.
And again, perhaps it was beneficial to have that experience on the park to manage the game from that point on as well.
Do you think the reignition comes a little bit from Shakhtar maybe taking their foot off the gas at 3-1, or more credit needs to go on to ourselves for, as I said, not letting the heads drop, finding that way back? Because I do think the second goal is very well worked, obviously on the back of the snapshot. Nicky Devlin, of all people, being in the right place at the right time, following it in, being on his toes, being alert. I remember Ian saying, if he'd just let the defender foul him, he'd have been sent off and would have had a better chance against 10 men for the last 15 minutes. But even then, we continued throwing bodies forward. You mentioned a couple of chances for Lazetic. I think he himself had a really good header from a corner that, he was a bit disappointed with. I think it was Topi had a shot where he could have played in Jesper Karlsson that the keeper holds at the second attempt. But, it wasn't for the want of trying. And, looking ahead to Sunday, because ultimately, the game ends in defeat. But that last half hour has given us something to build on, and that must now be the standard and performance levels that we see on Sunday. But the question is, do we? Because, as I said to Keith at halftime, we've put a lot into that game off the ball, and a lot of the first half was chasing the ball. We could see a little bit of a European hangover, that old footballing cliche, this weekend.
Yeah, I suppose what it proves is that in the face of adversity, we do have it within us to respond, and we're more than capable of finding a way back into the game. We've not really seen enough of that in the league, because we've tended to fall a goal behind, and there have been situations where there's been a slight response, but it's never looked that likely that we're going to find a way back into the game.
See on you saying there in the face of adversity that the players, or obviously what you're alluding to when you said, we've shown that bit of fight. Do you think last night has also shown in the face of adversity, Jimmy Tillene has shown that he's got a bit of fight about him, and that any of this talk or potential talk that comes about that the players aren't playing for him is rubbish, because again there felt that unity, that connection between the fans and the team that's probably been missing
Yeah.
domestically this season. It felt like the good old days at the start of last season, in terms of the fan and player connection. But yeah, I felt that Jimmy's maybe got a little bit of that fight back based on the performance and the connection as he goes on with the fans.
Yeah, and I think if we look at the game in isolation compared to other fixtures that that it falls in and amongst, clearly the successive defeats against Dundee United and Motherwell, and then that obviously precedes the game on Sunday against Dundee. We did speak about whether this game was going to be a nuisance for us, or actually a really welcome change of focus. And I think it's ended up, we speak before the Dundee game here, but it looks as if it's the latter, because we didn't take a hammering. It could have been that situation, and that would have done no good at all to a team already bereft of confidence.
Yeah.
But I think from what we saw last night, it looked as if coming away from that league environment where there is just so much like scrutiny, and it almost feels as if there's jeopardy around every corner with every match that passes. Certainly on the run that we're on just now.
Yeah.
It was a fresh environment where little was expected of us, and I think we've grasped that in a way that you would hope that has a positive impact on how we approach the game on Sunday. Yes, fatigue could be a concern just given what we've put into the 90 minutes. But then again, a point that we've made, I think we've both agreed on it. Squad depth this season is not an issue for us. We almost have too many options, and that perhaps has been to our detriment at stages of games. And maybe it will simplify things a little bit more, just knowing that we do have players ready to step in that will be fresh coming into Sunday. I mean, we will have to rely on some that put a shift in on Thursday as well. But
do you think then, for obviously we'll come to speak on Sunday just in a second, but just when you mentioned there about the kind of the confidence thing for going forward, do you think last night will also give us confidence going forward in the Conference League as well? Because I mean, currently, yes, one game in, 0 points, but we're still technically in the playoff places on goal scored and goal difference. So we'll clutch at that straw. But I think the context of who we've been drawn against also, our next up is a trip to Athens. They lost last night, and they're the only side that we were drawn against to actually lose last night. The other teams all won. Larnaca's definitely the eye-catching one, albeit played 88 minutes against 10 men as they blew Alkmaar away 4-0. I think really stepping that up in the second half. Noam, again, potentially with an eye-catching result, a 1-0 home win against former Don's opponents, Rijeka. Again, is that potentially Rijeka struggled with the trip to Armenia? How will the Armenians, cope with travelling to Pataudry? I still think that's got to be the home game we target for a victory. Although I'm sure Noel are looking at our game as one they'll target for another victory, and obviously putting themselves in a good position off of the back of a win on match day one. And I suppose that's the other caveat, to your tinge of disappointment, Skinner, is that had we picked up a point, we'd have really given ourselves a platform within this competition. And by last but no means least, Strasbourg also coming out 2-1 victors last night. I think it's safe to say there'll be loads of weird and wonderful results over this Conference League campaign, but performance in isolation and how we coped with, a team, I think, in the top 5 to win this whole competition has given me confidence for the upcoming home games, certainly. But hopefully the players can take that confidence as they head to Athens in 3 weeks' time.
Yeah. No, because I did take a quick look at the results after full time last night, and I suppose we have maybe it's a little bit of ignorance on our part, but we've earmarked Noah and Larnaca, I suppose, as being the most gettable opponents that we're going to face, and maybe that just lays bare how difficult a run of fixtures that we've got, just based on the strength and the quality of the other 4 teams, but for them to come out with results like they did, particularly the Larnaca one, as you mentioned, it lays bare just how challenging and perhaps topsy-turvy the whole group phase is going to be.
Yeah.
But you're right to mention the fact that we could have taken a real hammering last night, and the fact that we've kept the goal difference, as we speak just now, down to just the 1, that could be key. Once we come into the, because it will ultimately be goal difference, I'm sure, that separates playoff teams from those that are eliminated. So I think the fact we've come through one really tough game and managed to avoid a hiding. I suppose Athens, how much do you read into the result last night? I mean, I haven't looked into it in any detail, I have to say, but
no, neither. I can do that quickly just now through the joys of not being live. And I've actually failed to mention Sparta Prague's result. They came out 4-1 winners over Shamrock. It was actually a 3-1 defeat for AK Athens. They'd taken the lead inside 7 minutes. And then Kovacevic hat-trick for Kelja. That's how I'm going to pronounce them. Folk can slaughter me for that. Sort off the Greeks. So again, in terms of our goal difference, we haven't taken a hiding. Hopefully we can take confidence from the result. But performance as well, as I said, let's talk quickly about the game on Sunday, because we're recording this on Friday night. And your wee man's already made 1 appearance, but I'm sure we've got other things that we could be doing on our Friday nights as well. Dundee coming up to Pittodrie, just 1 league clean sheet for the Dark Blues. Obviously, we've not been prolific ourselves, but should hopefully give us some confidence. The Dens Park side have also failed to win away in the league. Jan Danda back in the matchday squad as they come, a player, of course, you'll be very familiar with from your Ross County days. I'm sure a player Stephen Presley will be delighted to bring back to support Simon Murray and the other strikers that Dundee can offer. How much, let's speak about Aberdeen first, do you think Jimmy Talleen is going to freshen up the squad on Sunday?
Yeah, I can definitely see changes. I suppose just looking at the wholesale in the 4 region, maybe.
Yeah,
somewhere in and around
4
that.
or 5.
Yeah, but then
change in
you might
shape
get
as well.
I'm not sure. I think now that we've kind of settled on, or now that we've seen, we haven't settled on anything, but we've seen this formation in the last 2 matches, and the fact that we are going to be making this transition between league and Europe as well, it probably suits us to, really put a little bit of stock on, trying to make this effective for us, because it has looked fruitful. We certainly, in large spells of the Motherwell game, we didn't look any less fluent than we have done in prior games. If anything, the opposite. We actually knocked the ball around quite nicely and seemed to maximise the wide areas slightly more effectively. So I would like to see the formation remain intact. But just when you look at the players that came off the bench on Thursday,
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't surprise me to see the likes of Polvara perhaps get a go. I think Nisbet might come back into the side.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't expect him to necessarily start. He obviously wasn't on the bench last night, but Bilalovic, I think, he's one that I would like to see involved in the game. Have a sizable chance in terms of whether it be an early substitution or at least coming in as a little bit of a wild card, because he's out with the European squad, but that gives us the chance to sort of unleash him on domestic opponents.
Yeah, and I was just writing down kind of whilst you were speaking there who I thought may drop out. I think both fullbacks will drop out, and I'm only saying that because of how spent Nicky Devlin looked. I think Sandy Jensen will come back in, and I can see Gyamfi coming in for Topi. Whether Topi retains his position in the team in a more forward role remains to be seen, but again, with the respect to Dundee, this is an opportunity to allow Topi Keskinen to gain some minutes on the bench and again freshen up. He's going to be away on international duty again after this game. Palaversa is probably the one in the midfield that I see dropping out, whether that be for a Nilsson Shinnie or Polvara remains to be seen. I like what Clarkson and Armstrong bring to the midfield, so I'd like to see both of them start. And then I also wrote down Lazetic for Nisbet. But on the fact that it is an international break after this weekend, is there potential then to not make as many changes and try and not go all out, but put almost the same starting 11 and give them an hour and allow Jimmy to then do as usual and make the wholesale changes, play the best squad available, because it is international duty coming up after full time.
Yeah, because I suppose the important thing to note as well is that anyone that doesn't make the starting lineup can still play a major role in the game, particularly if the match is still in the balance, sort of going into the early stages of the second half.
I wonder how much the weather is going to have an impact. Obviously, Storm Amy's set to bring disruption during Saturday, and if the remnants are still there, a windy game at Pittodrie is never one for the football purists, and that potentially suits Stephen Presley's side.
I mean, I haven't seen enough of Dundee to really know, what's within their squad in terms of, dealing with those elements. I think he's brought a lot of kind of players in from English lower league football, some young players maybe from, an academy background, just off the top of my head. Clearly, they do have some experienced campaigners. You mentioned Murray and Danda, two players that, have massive potential in this league. We've seen that time and again at the back. Obviously, they've got guys like Clark Robertson who, has experience. But it just depends on how the game unfolds, I suppose, and what sort of performance we bring in the early stages ourselves. I think the onus will be on Aberdeen as the front foot team. I do see Dundee perhaps anticipating that, and probably even more so off the back of what we saw on Thursday. So I think we will be shown an element of respect in the early stages, and it's up to us to, really come up with some sort of answer for that.
And that's what I was going to say, is how much is the, as you said, onus on us to start the game on the front foot, not just for the crowd's sake, to keep the crowd on side in one way, I suppose, but keep the crowd engaged. Because, given, as I said, for me, Sunday is the bigger of the two games this week, given our league form and depending on results elsewhere, what it could mean. I think it really is important that we start the game well and really push Dundee back to the kind of same effect that Shakhtar did with us for large spells of that first half on Thursday night.
Yeah.
And probably more important that we're the ones to get that first goal. This game in particular, given Dundee's relatively poor form away from home, the fact that they're actually a team joint with their next door neighbours to have faced the most shots in the Scottish Premiership this season, they will give up chances for the Aberdeen front line to hopefully exploit. It is crucial that I really feel that we get that first goal, because if Dundee are to take the lead, it'll be the, oh no, here we go again. And
Yeah.
it's probably important that the crowd, if we do go behind, stick with the team this weekend.
Yeah. Well, that was a point that I was making just earlier on, in regards to how we deal with adversity. Obviously, it's maybe slightly easier to do that when you're up against a team like Shakhtar Donetsk that you're expecting to lose against. If it's Dundee, with all due respect, then perhaps that's when you do get the moans and groans coming in a little bit more audibly. But I think we've seen us almost threaten to make that bright start in most games, certainly at Pittodrie this season. I think we have started most games on the front foot, and I even include the Celtic game if you go way back, to the early weeks of the season. I thought we kind of started on the front foot in that game as well. But it's about how we maintain that, and that's the bit that really has been a bit disheartening. Just becoming a little bit lost in the flow of the game, and ultimately just making poor decisions and rushing things a little bit too much. So again, a word that was floated around an awful lot off the back of the Motherwell game was confidence, just how bereft of confidence we look. And I think clearly Shakhtar will have helped that. I think what would help it even more is to, see some kind of reward for a promising start on Sunday by virtue of a goal. If we are to have a tangible reward for attacking efforts early in the game, then I do think that could make a huge difference in how it unfolds.
And I think you're absolutely right as well, that we have to show that composure in the final third, whether it's the player taking the shot or the player looking to play that killer final ball into the striker, because too often this season we've lacked that bit of composure or the correct decision making. But yeah, no, I like the message. Get us on the front foot, show in the face of adversity that we're up for the challenge. And I mean, our season starts now and then finishes for a couple of weeks for yet another international break that seems to keep on occurring. And then it's next month as well in November. We've got another one to look forward to. But of course, with the international break, it does allow us a little bit of time to digest Sunday's result. However, it comes before we jump back on to reconvene and discuss the events from the weekend. But we will still try and look to bring that to you next week as well, probably in the early parts of that. Thank you once again to Andy Skinner for joining me on Friday evening to dissect the game and preview the game this weekend. To all of you for tuning in, whether it's here on YouTube, on audio platform of choice, remember to like the video, follow along on audio. Until next time, we will see you then.